This reading is called The Right to Write, and it is intended to help you with blocks you may have in writing, but you may find that it may resonate for other areas of life also. So if you're not a writer, if you're a painter or a chef or any other sort of creative field, you can still listen in and maybe you'll hear something that will resonate for you. So the first question is, what is blocking your creative voice? Oh, these are upside down. Okay. Right. So we have chaos, number 32, authenticity, number 36, 47, timeline, and upside down we have 40, purity. What I have been seeing in this card, timeline, is that while there's different directional signs, and you would assume that these are roads because of those directional signs, they're not actually, they don't appear to be roads. They look more kind of like, I don't know, tree branches in a way. So if you're branching out and there's confusion about which direction you're going, it's harder to take any sort of a clear step. If you're trying to move down a trajectory, but you don't even see the next point where you're supposed to, the next milestone, the next exit, for lack of a better word. Basically, if you don't have any sort of a way to navigate, if you can kind of just get turned around at any moment, which the chaos also speaks to, then the purity or the clarity of what it is that you want to say authentically, your authentic voice, and that when you're in your authentic voice, that is when you're able to just let things flow, because you don't have to give a lot of thought to how your words are going to be interpreted by external sources. If you're speaking for the audience but not yourself, if you're not speaking from your authentic voice, then the audience is the primary concern, and that's a really difficult, if not impossible, way to create something that you yourself are going to be really satisfied with, because even the fact of whether or not it can endure is going to be subjective. It's not going to be anything really concrete as far as your feelings about it. It's just really hard to feel good about saying things that don't resonate with you yourself. If they're just said for an audience, then a lot of the purity is removed from the whole act of creation. And it's difficult to move forward under that sort of restriction, because so much about creating and writing is healing and owning and being able to find clarity for yourself while you're searching for that clarity to impart what you have to say to other people. So I think that the block here is the consideration of outside opinions before the work is even born. Because if everything is subjective, then it's really hard to get started, because there's always going to be a reason why you shouldn't. Because there's always going to be some random faction that would disagree with what it is you intend to say. So the external chaos is blocking your authentic voice. What do you fear about saying what your soul wants to express? We have phases, which is number 16, hero, number 29, 30 with crowd surfing, and 19 with spring. Again, I'm getting the sense of the audience, the demographic, and the need to come across to that demographic in a certain light, is generating fear, because phases here speaks of how there are cycles to everything and things change. But when you're crowd surfing, not every person in that crowd is going to be holding you up. And there's even some that will drop your ass. So it's hard to plant seeds that are going to bloom in spring. You know, it's hard to generate work that actually you feel is going to blossom if you're not even sure what your approach should be, because of the changing nature of both circumstance and environment, and the changing nature of your audience. Because, I mean, not only are you subjecting your voice to that changing nature of the audience as far as different people, but each of those different people is also a wild card because of ever-changing moods. And so the person that you need to satisfy with your voice is yourself. Because if you are satisfied with what you say, sure, you might have fear about what the crowd is going to say, but it's a lot easier to disregard. It's the hardest thing is to disregard what other people are saying when you know that you did not really say what you intended. When you have to defend something you don't believe in, basically. And I think that is something to be more afraid of, being put in the position of coming across as completely different than you actually are, and having to defend that position in your work. How can you ease this fear? I'm stuck with 56, mountains with 17, and beginnings with 53. And actually, it's just beginnings because this is the next question, and I kind of conflated them. Sorry about that, but that's a preview. Beginnings with 53. Easing the fear is just about, like, this has a lot of different sort of bird shapes to it. One of them is a swan, and another one that comes to my mind is phoenix. So a swan starts off from completely different beginnings than they end up in when they're mature. The ugly duckling comes to mind, and phoenix springing from the ashes. Also, so, I mean, if you have been in a position where you have said things that were inauthentic to how you truly felt in the past, if you have created things that you would now like to distance yourself from, basically that tearing away from, yeah, I mean, being completely tied to what you've done previously. You don't need to be. You can just sort of mentally burn it all down and then spring forth fresh from the ashes of that. And as you spring forth fresh, the ashes will like fall away from your feathers as you flap your wings and fly. And you'll be able to go to a better creative area where you can access that fresh energy. Because both with the swan and the phoenix has to come from ashes. So whatever was before has already been burned down and destroyed. So the phoenix really can't take any of that with them. And with the swan, it's a complete image change. Going from a duckling to a beautiful, graceful swan. There's a complete separation from that past energy, that past voice. And if somebody wants to tie you back down to that past voice, that's on them. It doesn't impact your ability to continue in your fresh energy with your fresh voice. It should bring up the question of why that person is so interested in doing that. You know, why would somebody want to keep you tied to the past when you're clearly progressing and growing in a direction that is more comfortable, a direction where you can either be graceful and idyllic on a lake or be soaring in the air triumphantly? Why would somebody want to disturb that? And then take that into consideration before you take their opinion into consideration. Okay, so what can you look at that may give you freeing insight? We have mountains and stuck. So I feel like stuck, which number 56 and 17 to be consistent, sorry about that. I feel like stuck is, there's a windmill sort of thing going on here. And the windmill relies on the wind to move it. It doesn't move on its own. And even though it moves, paradoxically, it doesn't go anywhere. It's in a static position. So, in a way, that's also kind of a hamster wheel vibe. It's just basically about going in circles in the same cycles over and over again. Because when you try to create to please others, that's what ends up happening. And the cycles may look different because of like the outer dressing of them, you know, fads and trends and all that. But the basic cycle is still the same, that it's chasing after approval. And chasing after approval blocks authenticity. So it just is going to generate the same energy over and over again. And if that energy is dissatisfying, which it feels like it certainly is, then it's just going to continue to be this cycle of dissatisfaction. And when you're in something like that, it's easy to feel like this is all that's possible. And so maybe it's best to stay with what's familiar. But mountains, this could be either a sun or a moon, I guess, depending on how you look at it. It could be clarity, it could be mystery. But the thing about mountains is, I can tell you, living in a place for a while that's completely flat, is I noticed that people here tend to think they have all the information they need to make a judgment. And I think most of us seldom have all the information we need just organically to make a judgment. I think that due diligence is not a bad thing. But there's something about like a flat piece of land, if you can see the horizon, it gives you this subconscious assumption that you already know everything that lies beyond it. But then if you move from a flat place to a place that has lots of mountains, or even just a couple of mountains, it gives you a subconscious realization that actually there's no way you can tell what's going on the other side of the mountain unless you actually go there for yourself to see. So, and another thing is there's like snow, these are snow-capped mountains. So the terrain from down here, depending on where you are, looks very different than it does from the top of the mountain. And the water, the way that this illustrates it sort of like flowing alongside them, it's not hard to imagine that that water, if it is rushing water, it's made different impressions on the land and it's eroded parts of it, so it's changed the shape of the land. And water is typically associated with emotion in tarot. So the emotion that you put into your work, the authentic emotion, and the stuff that people don't know goes on the other side of the mountain. You know, these things can change perspectives. So the emotion can change the very grounding of things. And the potential that's on the other side of the mountains can do a lot to change perspective. So, I mean, you can kind of look at it like you may have been stuck in a rut with writing, but realize that you cannot see everything that you're capable of right now. And realize that to you, your emotions may just be, you know, part of the landscape and something that you have to deal with or something that you have to wade through. But for that landscape, the emotional part of you that you put into your writing may actually change the way other people are able to walk that same ground. How can you begin to apply this insight? We have resistance, number 45, it's upside down. So that seems like it's pretty clear, actually. You have to get out of your own way and let yourself do this. I know that's easier said than done, but resistance and force have a very tight symbiotic relationship. If you force something, it's going to resist. And if you resist something, then it will eventually be forced upon you. If it's, you know, if it's a coming thing, I guess. I don't know. Maybe you probably like disprove that what I just said. But for this instance, I think maybe it does make sense, even if it's not like empirically an accurate statement, right? Because the thing is, no matter where you go, there you are. You cannot get away from yourself. And you can't get away from what's in your heart and what's in your gut. And what your particular talent, your particular gift, and your unique voice have to bring to the table. You can try to get away from it, and you can try to seek I guess commercial success as your main objective when you're sitting down to write. But the public is so fickle. And so you just get back into the cycles and the crowd surfing and chasing after the end of the maze that never comes because it's you just going in a circle. So at this point, not resisting what you truly want to say in the way that feels the most natural for you to say it. It's going to be a new thing, and it's absolutely worth the experiment. Kind of like when George Costanza on Seinfeld decided he was going to do everything opposite. Worked out well. The only thing you have to lose is the stress of chasing that approval, because even if that approval is gained, it's only momentary. It's always, the whole thing of like, you're only as good as your last record or whatever. If it all relies on public opinion is malleable, it changes, it's constantly flitting around. You've done that route, and it's time to try something different. And you're completely capable of doing that, because you actually, what you have to say will make the trends, will set the taste. You won't have like a prefab ready slot to slip into in the mode of getting the approval of others, because your voice is too unique for that. So you're going to have to sort of erode the landscape a little, make your own groove. But that's exactly what you're here to do. So the Muse cards are Switch Gears and Sympathy for the Devil. Sympathy for the Devil speaks of seeing the humanity in the adversary and seeing the origins of what makes them an adversary. And switching gears is essentially that, going from looking for that approval to, I really truly need to please myself first before anyone else. And a lot of people could say probably, oh, well, that sounds really selfish and horrible and, egotistical or whatever. But that would assume that pleasing yourself involves having no ethics or morals. And I think that, most of us do have a standard that we hold ourselves to. We could probably argue with other people as to whether or not, our standard is the best way. But, switching gears to please yourself is not so craven as it sounds, because you want to bring new things into this world. You want to create new ways for people to basically find solace. So how could you be a bad person? It's impossible. I mean, I won't even get into the debate about whether people are bad or not, but just the whole, there's no reason why anyone should view somebody who wants to create something as having an ill intent about representing what they want to create authentically. In fact, quite the opposite. We need more authenticity and less sleight of hand. But it's important to understand, by being able to see the mindset of those who would do things in a way opposite of us, understanding them not only informs what we create, but it also underscores the importance of the fact that we create it. Okay, and then I call these Rorschach cards, but I won't go into all that. I'll just say what they are. Eat a peach, and aligned feels natural. So when you're aligned and you're doing things that are in alignment with your best interests, and in best interests, we're going to say includes ethics and morals. So, there's no quibbly stuff. The way you can tell the things you're doing are aligned and serve you is, do they feel natural? Does it feel comfortable? Does it feel like, yeah, okay, I'm for this, and I am exactly like okay with being and doing this as I am. Like, what I'm trying to say by that is I'm thinking of Thoreau saying never trust or distrust any enterprise that requires new clothes. Because that's basically saying that you are not enough as you are at the very moment. You have to go get kitted up in something more formal. And a lot of formal wear can be very uncomfortable. I mean, it has its place. I'm not dissing like any sort of formal wear, but just as a metaphor here, self-acceptance and that which feels good for you, these things are going to feed creativity, and they're going to feed your voice developing and coming out more and more authentically. And Eat a Peach, it's a line from T.S. Eliot, Dare to Eat a Peach. And I think part of what that can mean, without actually like Googling it, is that when you eat a peach, it's messy. And it's probably going to squirt all over you. You're going to get it all over your face and your hands and probably down your shirt. And it may even hit other people too. Who knows? But the primal act of biting into it and the textures that are there, because they're fuzzy on the outside, and then the skin's really firm, and you kind of have to penetrate through it, and then you have the meatiness inside, and then there's a pit. There's like a whole experience there. Whereas if you just get a can of peaches, you open up the can and they're in syrup and there's no fuzziness, and it's just sort of like this weird uniform texture, the peaches. And it's like somebody's already decided how that experience is going to go for you, in a sense. So don't be afraid to get your hands dirty, metaphorically speaking. Don't be afraid to be sloppy. The most important thing about creation is it being able to enjoy the process, because that feeds the end result. And that makes me think of Spalding Gray talking about in Monster in a Box, when he was finally hitting a good stride with the novel he was trying to write, and did write, Impossible Vacation. And he said, and I'm giggling while I write. And that right there, creating a world that you're pleased with, that is so much more important than pleasing some blank placeholder with a question mark. You know, this person could be here. Who is it going to be? We don't know. You know, anybody at random. It's like an impossible feat to please the yeah, I don't need to continue with that. You got that thought. Okay. Hedgehog. I'm going to look this up because unfortunately I only have one association with that word, and it's not one that I want to say in this reading. Hedgehog is vulnerability, hiding the heart, and tenderness. So I looked up in the guide for that. And that makes a lot of sense. Because when you're trying to please other people with what you create, you are hiding your heart. And you prevent yourself from, or you think you prevent yourself from being vulnerable. But really, that's not the case at all. Because you're still vulnerable. You're just vulnerable in a different way. You're vulnerable in a way that you can be distanced from. Because it's not your authentic voice. So it's not your real feelings. So if somebody has something to say about your fake creation, you know, for lack of a better term, it's not like you put your best characters out there that you love so much and then somebody shit all over them. It's like, oh, well, those characters were throwaway characters and I don't care anyway. But you can only go so far with that as far as satisfaction, and then you hit a wall, and it's always the same wall with the same graffiti on it. So again, it's speaking to, I mean, the hedgehog is like all protected by all the prickly spines or whatever, but can't really get close to a hedgehog. I mean, you probably could. I have never pet a hedgehog, but just from like this picture, let's pretend that like he's kind of, I guess, porcupiney. It's more difficult to sort of nuzzle your face up in all that, I guess. I guess what I'm trying to say is hiding your authentic self prevents a certain amount of intimate experience with your audience that is actually the reason why people go to art in the first place. We have art so as not to die of the truth, Nietzsche said. So, and that's very true. Your music oracle is Shakira. And it says, don't dream about the sunset at midday. Know your rights. And travel is the most effective antidote to indifference. Travel is the most effective antidote to indifference, to me, relates back to the mountains. Because when you travel, you shake up that energy that sort of, we all sort of have like our little pig pen energy or whatever, that is like, this is like our comfort zone that travels with us, but it's not as big a cloud in a foreign land, you know what I mean? Not necessarily a foreign land, but just change of scenery, change of input, change of fuel. Stirs up your system, so to speak. Because it's easy to be indifferent when you've seen it all. But when you switch it up, you don't know what's coming because you're getting in the new input. And I mean, like, garbage in, garbage out. If you're getting the same stale stuff over and over from the same set of factors or elements or things that you take in for inspiration, eventually the well of inspiration dries up. But if you're able to throw monkey wrenches in there sometimes, you know, seeing a film that you would never see, for whatever reason, or going somewhere that you would normally think was not your cup of tea, or just inviting any sort of new stimuli in. Even if it's just a little bit, just that new element can really affect everything else in there, and can even change certain ways that you look at things that you had become indifferent to, and help you see those in a new light. Know your rights. You have the right to not remain silent. You have the right to speak your truth and speak the things out into the culture that you want to see there. And if people don't care for it now, then the French will 50 years after you're dead. Don't dream about the sunset at midday. Live in the moment. If you're starting to write, live in that moment. Don't live in the moment of finding the literary agent, or scoring the great content writing job, or seeing your book in a bookstore, or any sort of like end result. Fully embody the process at the point that you're in it, and enjoy it, and suck the marrow out of it. Your art oracle is Georgia O'Keeffe. Nature can keep a secret. Keep Freud guessing. You can't run away from yourself, but running away from others can be quite productive. Okay, well, earlier we were saying, no matter where you go, there you are. So that's a nice little dovetail here. But it's true. Getting away from all the outside stuff that doesn't serve what it is you're trying to create. It's just, clearing away those distractions so that you have room to confront yourself and confront your authentic voice, and to dig in and to find what is there. Nature can keep a secret. I don't know. It kind of strikes me in this instance as being, you never know what's underground and what's going to spring up from the earth. And in that sense, we can make a parallel to your authentic voice and say, you never know what amazing flowers will come out of the seeds that lie within you, that you just need to sow and till and all that, and water, and give sunlight to. Keep Freud guessing. I kind of feel like with this one, there's no need to feel constricted by gender stereotypes, by stereotypes that apply to age, that apply to whatever particular archetype, I know that's young, but still, that you might be embodying at this moment or any other. You don't have to stay static as a personality or a persona. Just because you have an authentic voice doesn't mean that that authentic voice has to stay exactly the same all over the course of your career. You can basically go in any direction you want to, and you don't have to be confined by someone else's idea of what that means. So I think that is it, and I really hope that this has been helpful and a little inspiring, or a lot inspiring. But I'm shooting for a little, just to be reasonable about goals here. So All right. Thank you so much, and much life, love, and light. Yeah, that's it. Love and light. Take care.